"What are you doing? That table is falling on her." Marcus Reed lunged from the open electrical panel as the guard folded one metal leg beneath the lemonade stand. Yellow paper cups scattered across the marble, and the glass dispenser tipped toward 10-year-old Sophie. Marcus caught it against his shoulder, shielding her with his body. Behind them, a red shutdown notice hung across the torn lemonade for the library sign, while a quiet old man in a gray sweater rose from a bench and watched. "Remove the stand," Denise Crawford said, her voice polished and cold. Sophie clutched the final cup to her chest. "Please don't tear my mom's sign." 23 minutes earlier, Rivergate Mall had been settling into its Saturday rhythm. Soft music floated above the fountain. Store gates rolled upward with metallic rattles, espresso machines hissed, and the air carried cinnamon, floor polish, and the faint burn dust smell of an aging circuit panel. Marcus knelt beside that panel with a screwdriver between his fingers while his 9-year-old son, Noah, sat a safe distance away finishing a library book. Marcus had taken the weekend shift because the overtime would cover the part of next month's rent his regular paycheck would not. Across the aisle, Sophie arranged paper cups in careful rows on a folding table. Her handwritten yellow sign leaned against a glass pitcher. The word library had been colored in blue marker, each letter outlined twice as if she had wanted it to look important. A small notebook sat beside the cash box, with every donation written in a child's neat handwriting. Walter Bennett sat nearby, dressed plainly enough to disappear among the older shoppers resting their feet. He watched Sophie straighten the sign for the 4th time, but he did not help. She had asked him not to. She wanted people to care about the library, not about who her family was. Denise arrived with Preston Vale, the owner of Lux Sip, walking half a step behind her. Preston's smile never left his face as he glanced from the handmade sign to the line beginning at his polished drink counter. "I'm sure this was well-intentioned," Denise said, touching the edge of Sophie's table with 2 fingers. "But unapproved vendors create liability concerns." Sophie immediately reached behind the sign. "I have the permit." Denise did not look at it. "Sweetheart, this is an adult compliance issue." The sentence sounded kind, but her hand had already lifted the red notice. Marcus looked up when he heard the paper slap across the sign. One corner of a white permit remained visible underneath, marked by a blue office stamp. Sophie tried to pull the notice away. It tore the yellow poster directly through the word library. Walter's hand tightened around the head of his cane. Marcus stood, wiping his fingers on a shop towel. "Ma'am, before you move the table, I need to check the clearance. It's close to an electrical service zone." Denise gave him a brief smile that never reached her eyes. "Thank you, Marcus. Return to your assignment." Brent Cole, the security guard, hesitated beside the table. Denise lowered her voice. "We have weekend traffic arriving. Clear this now." Brent reached for the folding leg. The damaged lock gave with a sharp snap. Marcus moved before anyone else did. After catching the dispenser, he set it upright, checked Sophie's hands for cuts, and placed himself between her and the unstable table. "Stop pulling it. The lock is broken. Let the child step back." Brent released the frame. Denise raised her radio. Maintenance employee abandoning an active electrical panel and obstructing an authorized removal. Marcus looked at the panel behind him. The insulated safety cover was secured. No live wiring was exposed. She knew that, or should have. Still, he did not argue. He picked the wet permit off the floor, placed it flat on his red toolbox, and moved the loose glass pitcher beyond Sophie's reach. "You can remove a table," he said quietly. "You don't get to frighten a child to make the process faster." For the first time, the old man by the bench looked directly at the name stitched over Marcus's pocket. Denise stepped closer, removed Marcus's temporary access badge, and produced a disciplinary form from a black folder. Noah rose with his book pressed against his ribs. Marcus saw the fear in his son's face, but he kept his voice level. "I'll sign after the permit and the safety condition are included." Denise turned the form toward him. At the top, the reported incident time was printed as 11:42 a.m. Above the fountain, The mall clock had just changed to 11:36. Marcus looked from the printed time to the clock above the fountain. It's 11:36. Denise kept one hand on the disciplinary form. The system rounds forward. By 6 minutes? The soft piano music drifting through Rivergate Mall continued as if nothing had happened, but the air around the lemonade stand had tightened. Water darkened the edge of Marcus's red toolbox, and the torn yellow sign clung to the marble by one wet corner. Denise's smile stayed polished. Mr. Reed, arguing over a timestamp does not change the fact that you abandoned your assigned station. Marcus glanced at the electrical panel. The insulated cover was locked, the warning cone remained in place, and his screwdriver lay exactly where he had set it. The panel was secured before I moved. That determination belongs in the review. Then put it in the report. Denise folded the paper back toward herself before he could point to the blank statement box. The motion was small, almost courteous, but it closed the conversation as firmly as a door. 2 employees from a nearby clothing store had stopped beside the fountain. One leaned toward the other, her voice low but not low enough. He probably thinks helping the kid makes him untouchable. The other woman glanced at Marcus's scuffed boots and the frayed cuff of his navy work shirt. Some people see one rich customer and start performing. Noah heard them. Marcus knew because his son's fingers tightened around the spine of his library book until the cover bent. Marcus reached over, gently straightened the book, and smoothed the crease with his thumb. Books don't like being squeezed, he said. Noah looked up at him. Are we going to lose the apartment? The question was quiet enough that only Marcus and Sophie heard it. For 1 second, the fountain seemed louder. Marcus did not promise what he could not guarantee. He adjusted Noah's backpack strap and said, "We deal with facts first. Fear comes later." Across the table, Sophie lowered her eyes to the donation notebook pressed against her sweater. The notebook's cover had swollen slightly from the spilled water, and blue ink had begun bleeding around the names on the first page. Marcus took a clean shop towel from his toolbox and laid the notebook open on it. "Keep the pages apart until they dry," he told her. "They'll stick if you close it." Denise turned to Sophie with a sympathetic expression practiced enough to look sincere from a distance. "Sweetheart, no one is saying your cause isn't important. We simply cannot allow unverified selling activity in a premium retail environment." Sophie held out the permit. "It was verified. Let the adults handle the paperwork. My name is on it." "That's enough, Sophie." Walter's cane tapped once against the floor. He did not step forward, but his gaze moved from Sophie's face to Denise's hand, which was still covering the bottom half of the permit. Preston Vale came around the counter of Lux Sip carrying a glossy voucher between 2 fingers. His suit jacket was pale gray, his shoes spotless, and the citrus cologne around him was sharper than the smell of the lemonade on the floor. "Maybe we can lower the temperature here," he said. Lux Sip would be happy to give Sophie a complimentary drink and make a small donation to whatever school project this is. "It's not a school project," Sophie said. "It's for the children's library." Preston's smile widened without becoming warmer. "Even better, but this part of the mall has contracted beverage service. We all have to respect the businesses paying to operate here." Marcus looked at the $3 price written on Sophie's cardboard menu, then at the digital display over Lux Sip advertising a $12 sparkling lemonade. Preston noticed, "This isn't about competition." "I didn't say it was. Your expression did." Marcus said nothing. He moved the cash box away from the wet edge of the table and placed the donation notebook beside it, keeping every bill and handwritten entry visible. Sophie pushed Preston's voucher back toward him. "If you want to donate, I have to write your name and the amount." A few shoppers nearby went quiet. Preston left the voucher on the table as though Sophie had failed to understand a kindness. Denise turned back to Marcus. "This is exactly why employees should not insert themselves into customer-facing decisions. She's not asking me to make a customer decision. You are escalating a situation because you feel personally connected to it. I met her 20 minutes ago, and yet here we are." Denise looked toward the 2 store employees, then at Brent, allowing the small audience to validate her authority without asking them directly. You repair fixtures, Mr. Reed. You do not decide who belongs in Rivergate Mall. The words were delivered softly. That made them carry farther. Marcus picked up the torn half of the yellow sign. Black marker had bled into his palm where the paper was wet. Then let me do the maintenance check before you call the location unsafe. Denise glanced at Preston before answering. The glance lasted less than a second, but Walter saw it. The decision has already been made. Before the inspection? Based on management standards. Which standard? Denise's smile disappeared only at the corners. You are in no position to interrogate mall leadership. Marcus pressed the torn edges of the sign together so Sophie would not have to watch the word library split in two. A rule that changes when a poor child uses it isn't a rule. It's a weapon. Brent shifted his weight. Preston looked toward the customers gathering near the fountain. Denise lowered her voice. Be careful, Mr. Reed. Your financial stress does not give you permission to question policies you do not understand. Noah flinched as if she had touched him. Marcus did not. He folded the shop towel over the wet permit, blotting the water without smearing the blue stamp. When he lifted it, Noah pointed to the lower corner. Dad, those are her initials. Denise reached for the paper too quickly. Marcus saw the blue office seal, the community event code, and the small handwritten letters DC beside the date. Denise had just told everyone she had never seen the permit, yet her eyes had gone straight to her own initials before Noah had even pointed them out. Marcus did not say Denise's name. He did not lift the permit toward the gathering shoppers or ask Noah to repeat what he had seen. He only turned the paper slightly, letting the overhead light catch the blue stamp and the small initials beside the date. Denise's hand remained suspended between them for half a second too long. That marking proves nothing, she said. Office staff process hundreds of forms. Marcus folded the damp shop towel beneath the permit so the ink would not bleed farther. Then the review can confirm it. You are still suspended. I heard you. And yet you are still standing here. The fountain sent a soft sheet of water over black stone, steady and indifferent. On the floor near Sophie's shoes, a bent yellow cup slowly rolled in a circle before settling against Marcus's scuffed boot. He bent to pick it up. The table leg is damaged, he said to Brent. If you drag it again, it could fold under her. Brent glanced at Denise before answering. We were told to clear it. Clear it safely. Marcus, Denise said. You are not being paid to repair a child's craft project. Marcus looked at the torn sign, then at Sophie's fingers pinching the wet edge to keep it from curling. No, he said. I'm doing this part for free. Denise exhaled through her nose and turned toward Preston, already dismissing him. That was the mistake. She assumed the small work did not matter. Marcus carried the permit to the dry end of the table, set it beneath the donation notebook, and took a tape measure from the loop on his belt. He measured the distance from the table to the marked service zone, then to the nearest exit path. He checked the width twice because one of the floor tiles was cracked along the grout line and could make the edge look closer than it was. 6 feet, 4 inches, he said quietly. The minimum is 6. Brent looked down at the line. So it's legal? It's within the safety clearance. But this leg isn't. Marcus crouched and pressed the locking bar with his thumb. The metal hinge shifted sideways instead of snapping flat. A pale crescent of rust marked the joint, and one screw had been replaced with a thinner size that no longer held the bracket tight. He opened his red toolbox, selected a short machine screw and washer, and braced the leg between his knees. Noah watched from beside Sophie, the library book still tucked under one arm. Are you allowed to fix it if you're suspended? He asked. Marcus tightened the washer until the joint stopped wobbling. I'm allowed to keep it from falling on someone. Even if they don't let you work? Especially then. Sophie looked at him. I can pay you from the lemonade money. Marcus shook his head before she finished. That money has a job already. He tested the hinge again, folded it once, opened it and listened for the clean click of the lock catching. Then he lifted the table just enough to move it 2 feet to the right, away from the damp tile and clear of the electrical service zone. He asked Sophie where she wanted the donation box before placing it, giving her back one small piece of control over a scene adults had taken from her. "Here," she said, touching the left corner. "People can see the notebook first." Marcus said it there. "Good choice." The yellow sign still hung in two pieces. The tear ran through the blue letters of library, leaving the words split like a door that would not close. Marcus pulled a roll of black electrical tape from his belt. He laid the sign face down on the cleanest section of the table, aligned the broken fibers, and pressed one strip across the back. Then another. He turned it over and smoothed the front with the side of his hand. The tape was too dark against the yellow poster, impossible to hide, but the word could be read again. Sophie touched the repaired line. "My mom helped me draw that word." Marcus paused. Not long enough to turn the moment into pity, only long enough to hear what she had actually said. "She had steady hands," he replied. Sophie nodded. "She said libraries are places where nobody asks what you can afford before they let you stay." Walter lowered his eyes. His thumb moved once across the worn brass head of his cane. Marcus did not notice. He was looking at the small price card beside the pitcher. $3 a cup. A handwritten note beneath it said all donations go to Maple Street Children's Library. He reached into his wallet. 2 20s, a 5, and 3 singles were tucked behind his driver's license. The 20s were for groceries. The 5 and singles were supposed to cover lunch for him and Noah until payday. He removed $3 and placed them beside the notebook. 1 lemonade. Sophie brightened for the first time. "Regular or strawberry?" "Regular. With ice." Marcus glanced at Noah. "Half the ice. We're sharing." Sophie poured carefully, holding the pitcher with both hands. Noah accepted the first sip, then passed the cup to his father. Marcus took only enough to wet his mouth. Denise saw the exchange and gave Preston a faint, almost amused look, as though Marcus had confirmed exactly what she believed about him. A struggling employee getting emotionally attached to a small, hopeless cause. Preston lifted his phone and took a picture from across the aisle. Marcus noticed the angle. The frame included his worn uniform, the handmade table, Sophie's cheap paper cups, and Noah holding the lemonade. It did not include the permit tucked beneath the notebook. Marcus could have crossed the aisle and demanded the photo be deleted. Instead, he stepped between the phone and Sophie's face. "Don't post her crying," he said. Preston lowered the phone a fraction. "This is a public place. She's a child, not content." The words landed without heat. Walter's gaze shifted to Preston. Marcus opened his lunch bag and found the turkey sandwich he had packed before sunrise. He tore it cleanly in half, gave Noah the thicker side, and wrapped the smaller piece back in wax paper. Noah looked at both halves. "Mom used to cut mine crooked," he said. The memory arrived softly, not as a wound displayed for strangers, but as something that still lived between father and son. Marcus's wedding ring pressed against the paper as he folded it. She said straight lines made lunch look too serious. Noah smiled, then noticed Marcus had given him more. He tried to hand part back. Marcus closed his son's fingers around it. "Eat." Sophie looked away politely, giving them the privacy a child could understand. Marcus returned to the table and lifted the permit again. The damp paper had dried. Enough for the details to sharpen. The blue office seal, the initials DC, the event code, and near the bottom, a rectangular indentation where a metal clip had pressed into the fibers over time. He held it beside the back of the yellow sign. The clip marks aligned perfectly with 2 faded scratches in the cardboard. The permit had not been slipped behind the sign after the argument began. It had been attached there long before Denise walked across the floor. Marcus said nothing. He took out his work phone, photographed the clip marks, the repaired sign, and the permit in the same frame, then uploaded the image to the maintenance log. Behind him, Denise opened a black folder and slid out the disciplinary report she had brought from the start. "This has gone on long enough," she said. "Mr. Reed, sign the incident statement." Marcus accepted the paper and read it from the top. His expression did not change until he reached the middle line. The form described an electrical disruption caused by the lemonade stand. No lights had flickered. No breaker had tripped. No electrical disruption had happened. Yet the sentence had already been typed, printed, and placed in Denise's folder before Marcus ever repaired the sign. Marcus read the sentence twice. What electrical disruption? Denise held out a pen. The one associated with your unauthorized intervention. Nothing lost power. The piano above the fountain continued without a missed note. Lux Sips blenders hummed behind Preston, the digital menu still glowing blue and white, and every ceiling fixture over the lemonade stand remained steady. Denise glanced toward the form as though the wording were too minor to deserve attention. Incident templates include standard risk language. Sign it, and the review will determine the exact sequence. Marcus laid the paper flat on his toolbox instead. The bottom edge curled where water had touched it, but the printed lines above were dry and sharp. He placed one finger beneath the reported time. Why does this say 11:42? Denise looked at the clock over the fountain. It read 11:37 now. For the first time, she did not answer immediately. Preston stepped closer, his polished shoes stopping just short of the wet floor sign Marcus had placed earlier. These systems round timestamps, he said. It happens with point-of-sale reports all the time. Marcus kept his eyes on Denise. Does the disciplinary system round forward? It can, she replied, depending on when the report is finalized. Was this finalized before you handed it to me? The question was simple. It slowed the space around them. Brent's hand stopped near his radio. Walter shifted his cane from one palm to the other. Denise recovered quickly, smoothing the front of her blazer with 2 fingers. Mr. Reed, you are focusing on a clerical detail because you do not want to address your conduct. I'm asking when the detail was entered, and I am telling you that Human Resources will review it. Then the original file should show them. Denise's expression stayed calm, but her thumb pressed harder against the pen she was holding. You are suspended from duty. You do not have authority to conduct your own investigation. Marcus did not argue with the word suspended. He opened the maintenance application on his work phone and selected the incident documentation function he used for leaks, damaged fixtures, and safety hazards. The screen cast a pale rectangle across his face. He photographed the mall clock first, then the secured electrical panel, then the 6-foot clearance between Sophie's table and the marked service area. He took one wide image showing the repaired yellow sign, the permit beneath the notebook, and the red shutdown notice lying on the floor. Each photograph uploaded automatically to Rivergate's facilities server, a small green check appearing when the file left the device. Denise watched the checks appear. You need to stop taking pictures of customers. There are no customers in the frame. Sophie is a minor. Marcus lowered the phone immediately and turned the screen towards Sophie. Your face isn't in any of these. If you want me to delete one, tell me. Sophie studied the thumbnails with the seriousness of a 10-year-old trying to understand adult rules. The one with the sign is okay, she said. It only shows my hands. All right. Marcus returned the phone to chest height and photographed the permit's blue seal, the initials DC, and the old clip marks pressed into the paper. He did not photograph Sophie. Walter noticed that. He also noticed Marcus had offered the child more control over the images than Denise had offered her over the entire situation. Still, Walter did not decide Marcus was right. A maintenance worker could be honest and still be mistaken. A manager could sound cold and still be following policy. The documents needed to speak without either person's pride attached to them. Walter slipped one hand into his coat pocket and sent a brief message to the family's outside counsel. Preserve all Rivergate security video, permit logs, incident records, and facilities uploads from 11 o'clock onward. Do not contact mall management yet. His phone disappeared before Denise turned in his direction. Marcus opened the digital page linked to Sophie's permit code. The screen showed the event name, date, and location beside a gray banner marked on hold. Was it always like that? He asked Sophie. She leaned close but did not touch the phone.
No.
Grandpa showed me the green check last night. Walter's eyes lifted. Denise answered before Sophie could say more. Approvals are provisional until on-site review. Who placed the hold? Marcus asked. The system does that automatically when a compliance concern is reported. What concern? Unlicensed beverage sales. Sophie frowned. But the permit is for lemonade. Denise's smile returned, gentle enough to sound parental. Sweetheart, forms can be submitted incorrectly. That is why adults verify them. Noah looked at the repaired sign and then at Denise. It was already approved before she got here, he said. Marcus touched his son's shoulder. Let the records answer that. He enlarged the activity line at the bottom of the permit page. Most of the text was hidden behind a permissions notice, but one entry remained visible. Status changed at 11:31 a.m. The lemonade stand had not been touched until several minutes later. Denise stepped between Marcus and Walter, blocking the older man's view of the screen. That device now contains material related to an internal investigation. Hand it to security. Brent straightened. Ma'am, if it's evidence, I need to log the transfer. Just take it. I need the chain of custody form. Denise's eyes moved to him with a warning that vanished almost as soon as it appeared. Of course. Follow procedure. Marcus locked the phone and placed it on the dry section of his toolbox rather than handing it directly to either of them. The uploads are already on the facility's server. Preston gave a quiet laugh. Assuming they weren't selectively framed. That's why I took the clock, panel, clearance line, and permit in sequence. You seem unusually prepared for someone who claims this was spontaneous. Marcus looked at the pre-written incident report. I wasn't the one who came prepared. A silence opened between them. Denise reached for the form and folded it once, hiding the sentence about the electrical disruption inside. Enough. The fountain camera has been under service since yesterday, so there may be no useful video. We will proceed with the written accounts. Walter's gaze moved toward the small black camera above the directory sign. The status light was glowing green, not amber. Marcus saw it too, but said nothing. He opened the incident app one last time before Brent sealed the phone and checked the upload details beneath his photographs. The disciplinary form had entered Rivergate's document server at 11:28 a.m., 3 minutes before Sophie's permit was placed on hold, 8 minutes before Denise approached the table, and 14 minutes before the electrical disruption described in the report was supposed to occur. Marcus stared at the upload record on the sealed phone. This report existed before the incident it describes. Denise's expression barely changed. You are reading system data without the proper context. Then what happened at 11:28? That will be reviewed internally. The words were smooth, almost reassuring, but Brent stopped fastening the evidence pouch. Around them, the whispers near the fountain faded until the low rush of water and the hum of the air conditioning became strangely clear. Walter lowered his phone onto his knee and looked at Denise with a patience that no longer resembled trust. Before Marcus could ask another question, a sharp electrical pop cracked through the salary. The lights above Lux Sip blinked once. A second pop followed beneath the counter, and a thin gray ribbon of smoke curled from a metal floor box beside the fountain. A little boy carrying a pretzel pulled away from his mother and stepped toward the sound. His sneaker landed at the edge of the wet tile. Don't move, Marcus said. The boy froze. Denise lifted both hands toward the gathering customers. Everyone remain calm. Security will handle this. Back behind the dark tile, Marcus told Brent. Move the children first. You're suspended, Denise said. He's right, Brent replied. Marcus was already moving. He took the yellow caution sign he had placed beside Sophie's table and slid it across the floor to mark the wet boundary. He guided the little boy backward by the shoulder, then pointed Noah and Sophie toward the dry stone beside Walter's bench. Stay with each other. Do not cross that line. Noah caught Sophie's sleeve and nodded. He did not try to follow his father. The smoke thickened near the floor box, carrying the bitter smell of scorched plastic. Preston stepped from behind Lux Sip's counter, his face tight beneath the same professional smile. This is exactly the hazard we were trying to prevent. The child's stand introduced liquid into a controlled beverage zone. Sophie's lower lip trembled. Marcus looked once at the overturned cup near her table. It was more than 15 feet from the smoking outlet, separated by dry tile and the fountain's raised stone border. That water didn't reach the box. You cannot know that from looking, Preston said. I can know where the water is. Marcus pointed to the thin stream running from beneath the fountain service panel. It moved slowly along the grout, darkening an old mineral stain before reaching the outlet cover. The stain was brown at the edges, layered from repeated drying. This leak had not begun with Sophie's lemonade. Another crackle sounded inside the floor box. Marcus went to the electrical panel he had secured earlier, checked the label, and opened only the insulated control compartment. Brent, call the fire desk and facilities dispatch. Tell them we have heat at circuit F12. You are not authorized to touch that panel, Denise said. Marcus's hand paused above the switch. There are children 10 feet from a heating conductor. Wait for the emergency contractor. How long? They have already been notified. When? Denise did not answer. The smoke sharpened, and the lights over Lux SIP flickered again. Marcus shut off the marked auxiliary circuit. The blenders went silent. The digital menu above Preston's counter turned black. For one suspended second, nobody spoke. A metal chair stopped scraping across the floor. Someone's ice shifted inside a plastic cup. Then the smoke began to thin. Marcus closed the compartment and placed the insulated cover back over the controls. He did not smile. He did not look at Denise. He crossed to the floor box, stopped outside the wet boundary, and crouched low enough to study it without touching. The screws were rimmed with oxidation. A pale line of dried mineral residue ran from the fountain service panel directly toward the outlet. This has been wet before, he said. Preston folded his arms. Or it was splashed earlier today. Marcus leaned slightly closer and breathed in through his nose. The insulation has been heating for more than a few minutes. Now you can smell time? Preston asked. A few people gave uncertain laughs, but they died when Marcus pointed to the warped edge of the outlet cover. Fresh heat softens plastic. Repeated heat discolors it. One corner had turned the color of old tea. Walter's fingers settled on the brass head of his cane. He had spent decades listening to executives speak confidently about things they had never examined. Marcus spoke differently. He named only what he could see. Brent returned from the security desk with a red emergency binder. Fire desk is sending someone. Facilities dispatch says there are 2 prior work orders on this outlet. Denise turned toward him. That cannot be correct. They gave me the ticket numbers. Marcus did not ask to see them first. Keep the area clear until the electrician arrives. He pulled off his navy work jacket and held it around Sophie's shoulders, blocking the child from the smoke and from the phones several shoppers had raised. You didn't do this, he told her quietly. But Mr. Preston said. He spoke before anyone checked. Marcus looked toward the crowd. Please don't film the children. A woman lowered her phone. Then another did the same. Noah stood beside Sophie, one hand still lightly holding her sleeve. The smoke was over there before her cup fell, he said. It was not an investigation. It was simply what a 9-year-old had seen. Marcus nodded. Tell that to the safety officer when they ask. Nothing more, nothing less. Denise stepped closer, lowering her voice as though offering Marcus protection. This does not need to become a spectacle. Let management handle the technical record privately, and I will note that you acted from concern. The technical record is why we're standing here. Be careful not to confuse a maintenance issue with your disciplinary matter. I'm keeping them separate. Marcus's calm seemed to trouble her more than anger would have. The emergency electrician arrived carrying a thermal scanner and a lockout case. He checked the dead circuit, measured the floor box, and traced the moisture back toward the fountain access seam. Leak's been feeding this channel for days, he said. Maybe longer. Denise clasped her hands at her waist. Could the lemonade spill have accelerated the failure? The electrician glanced at the dry space between Sophie's stand and the outlet. Not from over there. The answer changed the air. Preston's smile disappeared. Brent slowly set the red binder on the counter. Walter sent another message without looking down. Preserve the maintenance tickets and all dispatch history. Use the backup server if necessary. Marcus waited until the electrician declared the area safe before asking for the prior work orders. Brent opened the binder to a printed dispatch page. Ticket F12-441 had been submitted by Marcus 6 days earlier after he noticed moisture near the floor seam. Ticket F12-466 had been submitted 2 days later when the outlet cover felt warm during a routine inspection. Both were marked deferred by management. You filed these? Brent asked. Yes. Why weren't they repaired? I don't approve the budget. Denise reached for the page. Deferred does not mean ignored. Repairs are prioritized according to operational needs. Marcus let her take the binder. He did not use the tickets to embarrass her. Instead, he turned to the mother of the little boy and asked whether her son had inhaled any smoke. He gave the boy a sealed bottle of water from his toolbox and checked that Sophie's borrowed jacket was not dragging near the wet floor. Walter watched him tend to everyone except himself. The man had just found the first record capable of clearing his name, yet he treated it as a safety lesson, not a weapon. The electrician connected his scanner to the circuit monitor. The ground fault began at 10:57 this morning, he said. Intermittent leakage, then a temperature spike at 11:39. Marcus looked at the clock. Sophie's pitcher had tipped at 11:36, but no water from it had crossed the dry tile. The system had recorded the fault 39 minutes before Brent touched the table. Denise's fingers tightened around the binder. We should continue this discussion in a private office. Why? Marcus asked. To prevent incomplete technical information from being misunderstood. Then let the complete information stay with the incident file. Brent looked at the sealed evidence pouch containing Marcus's phone, then at the binder in Denise's hand. He took out a chain of custody label. I'm adding the work orders and the electrician's preliminary reading. Denise's voice cooled by half a degree. That is unnecessary. It's procedure. For the first time, Brent used the same word she had used against Marcus. He copied the ticket numbers, sealed the page behind a clear sleeve, and signed across the adhesive strip. Sophie's shoulders lowered slightly beneath Marcus's jacket. The danger had passed, and the first solid proof had done something no argument could. It had made the people around them stop treating Marcus as a desperate employee inventing excuses. But it still did not explain why Denise had prepared an electrical accusation before the real failure occurred. As Brent returned the binder, a line of smaller text appeared beneath the second deferred ticket, printed from the facility's archive rather than the summary screen. The instruction had been entered through the assistant manager's account at 4:18 the previous afternoon. Delay repair until after weekend promotion. Marcus read it once, then looked past Denise toward the dark Lux SIP menu and the promotional banners hanging above Preston's counter. The outlet had not simply been overlooked. Someone had decided the weekend sales event mattered more than the warning, and someone else had known an electrical failure could be useful before it ever happened. The printed instruction beneath the deferred repair ticket sat between them like a confession no one had meant to make visible. Delay repair until after weekend promotion. Marcus looked from the line to the dark Lux SIP menu, then to the banners hanging over Preston's counter. Who entered that note? Denise closed the emergency binder. An assistant may have used shorthand without understanding the maintenance priority. The ticket says the outlet was warm, and management schedules repairs according to operational impact. A heating outlet is the operational impact. The fountain pumps continued beneath the floor, sending a faint vibration through the soles of Marcus's boots. Around them, the crowd had thinned, but the remaining shoppers no longer looked at him like a maintenance worker inventing an excuse. They looked at the binder in Denise's hands. Marcus could have asked Brent to read the instruction aloud. He could have pointed toward Preston's promotional banners and let the room draw its own conclusion. Instead, he turned to the electrician. Can the circuit remain locked out until the leak is repaired? It has to, the man said. I'll tag it and file the preliminary report. Marcus nodded. Make sure the children's stand is listed as outside the affected zone. Denise's eyes narrowed slightly. No one has accused the child personally. Sophie was still wearing Marcus's navy jacket. The sleeves covered most of her hands, and a drop of dried lemonade had left a pale mark near the zipper. You told everyone her table caused it, Marcus said. That is personal when you're 10. Walter watched Denise's fingers tighten around the binder. She recovered by turning toward Brent. Secure the area and escort Mr. Reed to the administrative office. We can complete the remaining review privately. Marcus looked at Sophie, then at the repaired yellow sign. Not until the permit is logged with the incident. The permit is a separate matter. It stopped being separate when the report blamed the stand. Denise's phone vibrated. She looked at the screen, pressed the side button without answering, and slipped it face down into her pocket. Preston's name had flashed across the display. Walter saw it. So did Marcus. Neither man said anything. Brent carried the sealed evidence pouch and emergency binder toward a small security desk near the fountain. I need copies of the permit record, work orders, and dispatch history, he said. Denise followed him. Only documents relevant to the electrical event. The report connects the electrical event to the stand. The report language was preliminary. It was written before the event. The sentence came from Marcus, but Brent was the one who stopped walking. Denise's heels clicked once more before she realized she had moved ahead of them. Her reflection hovered in the dark glass of the closed digital directory, composed except for the pulse visible at the base of her throat. Mr. Reed, be very careful about implying misconduct before Human Resources has reviewed the facts. Marcus lifted the wet disciplinary form from his toolbox. I'm not implying anything. I'm asking the order the facts happened in. At the security desk, Brent logged into the event scheduling system. The monitor was angled away from the public, but Walter could see its glow reflected in the polished metal around the fountain. Sophie's permit appeared with a green approval mark dated 3 days earlier. Beneath it, an activity trail showed the status changing to on hold at 11:31 that morning. Can you open the user entry? Marcus asked. Denise stepped closer. Security does not have permission to audit management accounts. I do, said a new voice. A woman in a charcoal suit had approached from the east corridor carrying a slim laptop case. She was in her early 50s, silver threaded through her dark hair, and she did not look at Denise before stopping beside Walter. Mr. Bennett asked that Rivergate's outside counsel preserve the records. Marcus looked at Walter. Denise did too. The old man remained seated, one hand resting on his cane. You called legal counsel? Denise asked. I asked that nothing be deleted, Walter replied. His voice was quiet, but the woman opened her laptop immediately. On what authority? Preston asked from behind them. Walter looked toward the black camera above the directory. Enough to make preservation the sensible choice. It was not a reveal, but it changed the air. Denise's polite expression held for another second, then thinned. This is an internal mall matter. We should not involve outside parties until ownership has been briefed. Walter's gaze moved to Sophie. Ownership should have been briefed before an approved child fundraiser was removed. The attorney connected to Rivergate's backup server through a secure access screen. The mall's printer began feeding out pages, each sheet landing with a dry mechanical slap. First came the permit audit log. The approval had been entered by the community events coordinator on Wednesday afternoon. The hold had been placed from Denise's administrator account Saturday morning. A note attached to the change read vendor conflict pending review. Denise folded her arms. That confirms what I said. A compliance conflict was reported. The next page was an email from Preston sent 2 hours before the hold. The subject line read Weekend Beverage Protection. His message warned that Sophie's $3 lemonade could dilute the premium launch experience, and asked Denise to enforce Lux Sips category priority. That is a normal tenant concern, Preston said. I did not request that anyone frighten a child. Did you have category priority? Marcus asked. Our sponsorship agreement includes promotional protections. The attorney opened the contract index. A marketing invoice appeared for Rivergate's weekend promotion, followed by a draft addendum titled Beverage Category Priority. Across the final page, the signature blocks were empty. The document had never been approved by the board. Denise reached for the printed copy, then stopped when the attorney placed her hand over it. Please don't remove documents from the review surface. The printer fell silent. In the sudden quiet, the unsigned addendum lay between them, its fresh fold lines still sharp. Marcus looked at the creation date in the lower corner. This draft was made yesterday. Preston adjusted his cuff. Drafts often formalize existing understandings. The permit was put on hold this morning, Marcus said, before the understanding became a contract. You are a facilities employee, Preston replied. You do not interpret commercial agreements. I'm not interpreting it. I'm reading the date. Walter's mouth tightened, almost imperceptibly. He had not believed Marcus because of the worn uniform, the shared sandwich, or the way he had shielded Sophie. He believed the dates because they remained the same no matter who read them. The attorney opened the radio archive next. Brent's voice played first, asking whether he should inspect the permit. Denise's reply followed through a veil of static. Remove the stand before lunch traffic. We can document the compliance basis afterward. No one moved. The refrigerator motor behind Lux Sip clicked off, and the absence of its hum made the sentence sound even clearer. Denise reached for the laptop. That recording lacks the surrounding conversation. We'll preserve the full channel, the attorney said, including the 10 minutes before and after. Denise withdrew her hand. A bead of perspiration had appeared near her hairline despite the cool air. This discussion is becoming misleading. The priority was maintaining order during a crowded promotional weekend. Marcus looked at Sophie's sopping donation notebook drying on the shop towel. Order for whom? Denise did not answer. The attorney searched the archived policy directory for community fundraising rules. Most files were routine insurance forms, food handling requirements, temporary table dimensions. Then an older, scanned document appeared with a title in faded blue type, Rivergate Community Access Clause. It guaranteed space for approved youth and nonprofit fundraisers and prohibited removing them solely because they did not generate commercial rent. At the bottom was a handwritten signature, Claire Bennett. Sophie stepped closer to the screen. That's my mom's name. Walter's hand closed around the brass head of his cane. For the first time since the table nearly fell, the old man's face lost its careful stillness. The attorney turned toward him, but he shook his head once, asking her not to speak yet. Marcus noticed the reaction. He also noticed the document had been scanned from a paper copy stamped with the founder's office seal. Is this still active? He asked. It was never repealed, the attorney said. Then why wasn't it in the current event manual? Denise answered too quickly. Because Claire's initiative was outdated after the retail restructuring. Walter stood. You remember who wrote it? Denise's eyes moved from him to Sophie, then back again. Of course. Ms. Bennett worked with the community program years ago. She had called Sophie's fundraiser a school project less than an hour earlier. Now she knew exactly where Claire had worked. Walter pulled an old brass key from inside his coat. Its head carried the original Rivergate emblem, worn smooth around the edges. He walked to an unmarked door beside the administrative corridor and opened it without a badge. Beyond it lay the founder's records room, shelves disappearing into dim amber light. Marcus understood only that Walter had access no ordinary shopper should possess. He did not yet understand why Sophie watched the old man with the wary love of a child who knew him far better than anyone else in the mall. Walter looked at the unsigned addendum, the altered permit, the deferred safety tickets, and Claire's forgotten clause. This does not get settled in a private office, he said. Denise's voice dropped. Mr. Bennett, public discussion could damage Rivergate's reputation. The damage happened in public. He turned to the attorney. Preserve the originals. Invite the tenant representatives, safety officer, community coordinator, and board counsel to the central atrium. Then he looked at Marcus, not with gratitude, but with the measured respect of a man who had watched evidence survive because someone without power refused to let it disappear. By the time the afternoon crowd returned, the same marble floor where Sophie had been told she did not belong would hold a public review, and every document Denise had tried to separate was about to be placed on one table. By 3 o'clock, the central atrium of Rivergate Mall no longer looked like a shopping space. A long folding table had been placed beside the fountain, directly where Sophie's lemonade stand had nearly collapsed. Tenant representatives sat in 2 neat rows facing it. The community events coordinator stood near the directory with a legal pad. The independent electrician waited beside a locked evidence case, and 2 members of board council spoke quietly beneath the second-floor railing. Shoppers slowed along the balconies above, drawn by the unusual sight of management preparing to explain itself in public. The repaired yellow sign stood at the center of the table. Black electrical tape crossed the word library like a scar no one had been allowed to hide. Marcus arrived in the same navy work shirt he had worn that morning. The fabric was dry now, but a dark lemonade stain remained near his left cuff. His temporary badge was still missing. Noah walked beside him, holding the library book against his chest, while Sophie stayed close to Walter and carried her donation notebook with both hands. No one applauded when Marcus entered. A few employees nodded. Others looked away. He did not take the empty chair at the front. He stood behind the low table, one hand resting near his red toolbox, as though he were waiting for a repair order rather than a public judgment. Denise arrived last. Her blazer had been changed, her hair smoothed, and a slim folder rested beneath one arm. Preston followed in a charcoal suit with a Rivergate sponsor pin on his lapel. He spoke first to several tenant owners, shaking hands and reminding them that Lux Sip had paid for the weekend's advertising, children's face painting, and live music. By the time Denise stepped behind the microphone, the room had been prepared to see her not as a woman under investigation, but as a responsible manager protecting order. This morning, she began, a routine vendor compliance matter became unnecessarily public. Her voice was measured and regretful. A child's charitable intentions were never in question. Unfortunately, an employee became emotionally involved, interrupted an authorized removal, and later acted outside the limits of his suspension during an electrical event. Marcus did not move. Denise opened her folder. Rivergate values kindness, but kindness cannot replace procedure, safety, or tenant rights. Several store owners nodded. Preston leaned toward the microphone only after Denise invited him. No one at Lux Sip wanted a child embarrassed, he said. Our concern was consistency. We operate under health inspections, insurance requirements, equipment declarations, and commercial fees. Allowing unregulated beverage sales beside a contracted tenant creates risk for everyone. He looked toward Sophie with practiced concern. I offered to donate privately so her library project would not suffer. For a moment, the explanation worked. It did not sound cruel. It sounded organized. A tenant representative from the second row raised her hand. Was the lemonade prepared in a licensed kitchen? Sophie's shoulders tightened. Walter looked down at her but did not answer for her. Denise opened a page in her folder. That was among the unresolved compliance concerns. The community coordinator glanced at her own records. The permit application lists sealed commercial concentrate, bottled water, disposable cups, and no food preparation. Denise turned smoothly. An application can list anything. On-site verification had not been completed. A low murmur passed through the rows. Marcus could feel the room beginning to move away from him again, not because Denise had disproved the evidence, but because she had offered a new uncertainty. Preston added, that is why this should have remained private until professionals completed the review. Marcus looked at the yellow sign. Sophie's fingers had left faint blue smudges along its edge when she made it. May I ask one question? He said. Denise hesitated before nodding. Was the permit approved? The community coordinator opened the official event record. Yes, 3 days ago. Was it canceled before this morning?
No.
It was changed to hold status at 11:31. After the stand was set up? Yes. Marcus looked toward the tenant representatives. Then Sophie did not arrive as an unregulated vendor. She arrived with an approved permit that management changed after she was already here. The murmuring stopped. Denise kept her posture straight. Approval was provisional. A tenant conflict required further review. Which tenant? Marcus asked. Preston answered before she could. Lux Sip raised a standard category concern. At what time? The attorney at Walter's side opened the preserved email. 9:17 this morning. Marcus nodded once. And the incident report about my conduct? Brent stepped to the evidence table carrying a clear sleeve. He placed the printed disciplinary form beneath the overhead document camera. The time 11:42 appeared on the large directory screen behind them. The file was created at 11:28, Brent said. Denise lifted a hand. The template was opened early because we anticipated resistance during the vendor removal. The wording was updated as events developed. That explanation landed harder than Marcus expected. A report could be prepared in advance. Managers often opened forms before meetings. Two board members exchanged a glance as if the matter had returned to administrative judgment rather than fabrication. Denise sensed the shift. Mr. Reed had already challenged instructions and refused to return to his assigned panel. The form was not evidence of a conspiracy. It was responsible documentation. The first retention spike passed through the room. Perhaps the future time had an ordinary explanation after all. Marcus looked at the screen, then at the paper in Brent's sleeve. Read the sentence under safety impact. Brent did. Unauthorized relocation of beverage stand contributed to electrical disruption in fountain service zone. The electrician folded his arms. Denise said, that language was preliminary. Marcus kept his voice low. The electrical disruption happened at 11:39. The facility's attorney changed the screen. A server log appeared beside the report. The sentence was present when the file was first saved at 11:28, she said. A chair leg stopped scraping across the marble. The sound of the fountain rose into the silence. Marcus did not look at Denise. A preliminary report can describe a risk, he said. It cannot describe an event that has not happened. Walter slowly placed both hands over the head of his cane. Denise's face remained composed, but she took a sip of water she had not touched before. The system may have carried language from another incident template. Then the prior template should exist, the attorney said. We found none. Preston stepped forward. Even if the wording was careless, the electrical danger was real. It was, Marcus said. That is why the repair history matters. The electrician opened the evidence case and removed the 2 work orders Marcus had filed. On the screen appeared photographs of the stained outlet cover, the warm floor reading from 2 days earlier, and the status line deferred by management. Denise said the delays reflected normal prioritization. The electrician answered without emotion. A warming outlet near a water source should not have remained energized through a promotional weekend. Then the facilities log showed the note entered by her assistant's account. Delay repair until after weekend promotion. Preston adjusted the sponsor pin on his lapel. That note has nothing to do with Lux Sip. The attorney displayed the equipment declaration from his lease. 1 blender, 1 refrigerator, 1 ice unit. Then she displayed the device photographed behind the counter after the outage. A second commercial blender with a higher electrical draw. Temporary replacement, Preston said. It was not the source of the leak.
No, Marcus replied.
But Sophie's $3 lemonade was treated as an unverified hazard, while your undeclared equipment operated beside a known electrical defect. He let the distinction sit without adding anger to it. Sophie looked up at him. Some of the fear had left her face. The community coordinator placed the original permit beside the repaired sign. The blue office stamp and DC initials were clearly visible. This was received by management, she said. Denise turned to her. Received does not mean personally reviewed. Noah shifted beside his father. She looked at the initials before I pointed to them, he said quietly. Marcus touched the back of Noah's shoulder. That is what he remembers. The records matter more. Walter watched him correct his own son gently rather than turn a child's memory into a weapon. Denise drew a breath. The records show a hold, not malicious intent. Then we should hear why the stand was removed before anyone inspected it, the attorney said. Brent carried a small audio unit to the table. He looked once at Denise, then pressed play. Static filled the atrium. His own voice came first. Do you want me to check the permit before moving the table? Denise's recorded answer followed. Remove the stand before lunch traffic. We can document the compliance basis afterward. The second retention spike moved through the room like a pressure drop. A tenant owner in the front row slowly lowered her pen. Preston's jaw tightened. Denise stepped toward the microphone. That excerpt omits context. We were managing crowd flow during a heavily promoted event. Marcus looked at the 6-foot measurement photograph now displayed beside the recording. The walkway was clear. You were not authorized to make that determination. The electrician spoke from the evidence table. His measurement was correct. Denise turned toward Walter. This review has become a performance built around one employee's interpretation. Walter did not respond. He looked at Marcus, waiting to see whether he would use the room's changing mood to humiliate her. Marcus placed the donation notebook beside the permit. This is not about making anyone smaller, he said. It is about making sure the truth is not buried because the person holding it wears a work shirt. Sophie tugged lightly at Walter's sleeve. He bent toward her. She opened the notebook to the last page and walked to the microphone with Walter one step behind her. Her voice was small, but the sound system carried it across both floors. My mom said no child should have to buy something before they are allowed to sit with a book. She set the notebook beside the scanned community access clause. The signature Claire Bennett appeared on the screen. Denise's attention snapped toward Walter before the attorney said anything. That policy was part of an outdated initiative, she said. Ms. Bennett's role ended years ago. The attorney looked up. No one mentioned that Claire Bennett had worked for Rivergate. Denise went still. She had known the name, the role, and the history while pretending Sophie's fundraiser was an unknown school project. Walter rose from his chair. Denise recovered quickly and pointed toward him. This gentleman has interfered repeatedly in an internal proceeding. Security should escort him outside until ownership can be properly briefed. Brent did not move. Walter reached inside his gray coat and drew out the worn brass key bearing Rivergate's original emblem. He walked to the low table and placed it across the black tape repairing Sophie's sign. On the directory screen behind him, the attorney opened one final file marked Founder's Office Ownership Record. Walter rested his hand beside the key, looked directly at Denise, and began to speak. Walter rested his palm beside the worn brass key. My name is Walter Bennett, he said. I founded Rivergate Mall, and I still hold controlling ownership. The ownership record opened across the directory screen behind him, displaying his signature, the original Rivergate seal, and the same emblem worn smooth on the key. Sophie moved closer to his side, still clutching the donation notebook. Walter looked down at her before facing the room again. Claire Bennett was my daughter. Sophie is my granddaughter. Denise's hand loosened around her folder. A silver pen slipped between her fingers, struck the marble, and rolled beneath the table. No one bent to retrieve it. The fountain kept falling over black stone. Somewhere on the upper level, an elevator chimed, but no one in the atrium turned toward it. Preston's sponsor pin caught the white ceiling light as he stepped back half a pace. Mr. Bennett? Denise began, her voice suddenly dry. Had I known the child was related to ownership? That is the problem, Walter said. He did not raise his voice. You believe her last name should have changed the way she was treated. Sophie's fingers tightened around the notebook. Marcus stood behind the repaired sign, breathing slowly. He did not look at Denise with satisfaction. He looked at Noah, making sure his son understood that the truth had not arrived because a powerful man was angry. It had arrived because the records had survived. Walter turned to the outside counsel. Please finish the review. The attorney selected the final evidence file. The mall directory screen divided into 6 panels. The first showed Sophie's approved permit and the blue DC initials. The second displayed the audit log placing the permit on hold from Denise's administrator account at 11:31. The third showed Preston's email complaining that $3 lemonade could weaken Lux Sip's premium launch. The fourth contained the unsigned beverage priority addendum. The fifth showed the 2 deferred electrical work orders and the note delaying repair until after the weekend promotion. The sixth displayed Marcus's disciplinary report, created at 11:28 with an electrical disruption already written into it. Denise swallowed. The report was a preliminary template. The attorney clicked once. A revision history appeared beside the document. The original file contained the electrical accusation 11 minutes before the actual outage. At 11:47, after Mr. Reed's time-stamped photographs uploaded, the report was edited to add language claiming he had relocated the stand into the service zone. Marcus's photographs appeared next. The mall clock read 11:37. The yellow stand sat 6 feet 4 inches from the marked boundary. The permit remained clipped behind the sign. The electrical panel was secured. Those pictures were taken by the employee under investigation, Denise said. They cannot be treated as independent. They were uploaded automatically to Rivergate's facilities server, the attorney replied. The metadata matches the server clock, and the Fountain camera's preview cache confirms the same positions. The screen changed. Grainy security footage filled the display. It showed Denise approaching the table with the black folder already beneath her arm. It showed the red notice striking the yellow sign. It showed Brent folding the damaged leg and Marcus leaving the secured panel when the dispenser tipped toward Sophie. Then it showed Marcus kneeling on the marble, pressing black electrical tape over the tear, while Denise stood several feet behind him, holding the report she had prepared before the event it described. The video contained no dramatic sound. That made it harder to escape. Every movement was quiet, ordinary, and exact. Sophie lifted one hand to her mouth. Noah reached for Marcus's fingers. Marcus closed his hand gently around his son's. The image froze with Marcus's palm flattened across the word library. The loose edge of the reel tape on the table fluttered beneath the air conditioning vent. Its faint tapping against the poster was suddenly the clearest sound in the atrium. Denise looked at the screen, then at the floor. Preston touched his sponsor pin as though he had forgotten it was there. My email was a legitimate tenant complaint, he said. I never directed anyone to falsify a report. The attorney opened the camera clip from the east corridor. Preston appeared handing Denise the unsigned addendum before she approached Sophie's table. The timestamp read 11:19. The recording had no audio, but the next preserved email supplied the missing context. It came from Preston's phone 9 minutes later. Need the stand gone before the noon launch. Treat the category protection as active. We can formalize Monday. Preston stared at the message. That wording was informal. The contract was not, Walter said, and it gave you no exclusive right. Denise turned toward Brent. Security carried out the removal. I relied on his assessment of the immediate scene. Brent's face tightened, but he did not look away. He placed the radio recorder on the table and pressed play again. His own voice asked whether he should inspect the permit. Denise's recorded answer filled the atrium. Remove the stand. Before lunch traffic. We can document the compliance basis afterward. Denise opened her mouth. Nothing came. Her hand moved toward the water glass, but the rim clicked against her teeth before she set it down. Walter looked at the board counsel. Does the community access clause remain valid? One attorney stood. Yes, it was approved by the board, never repealed, and still governs approved youth and nonprofit activities. Did Sophie violate it? No. Did Marcus Reed violate electrical safety procedure? The independent electrician answered.
No.
He secured the panel before responding, isolated the fault correctly, protected the public, and preserved the incident data. Walter's gaze moved to the repaired sign. Then let the public record be corrected now. Board counsel stepped to the microphone. Denise Crawford was placed on paid administrative suspension pending an independent investigation into record alteration, safety deferral, procurement misconduct, and abuse of managerial authority. Her access to Rivergate systems and staff supervision was revoked immediately. Lux SIP's promotional privileges and proposed contract addendum were frozen for formal procurement review, while protections were ordered for employees who had no role in Preston's actions. Marcus's suspension was rescinded. His disciplinary report was marked invalid. His lost hours were restored with full pay, and the safety office entered a commendation into his employment record for preventing injury and preserving evidence. Sophie's permit returned to approved status on the screen. The community coordinator signed the correction in front of the room. The lemonade stand was authorized from the beginning, she said. It did not cause the electrical failure, and Sophie Bennett violated no Rivergate rule. Sophie released a breath that seemed to have been trapped in her chest all day. She did not smile immediately. She simply placed both hands on the yellow sign, as if making sure no one could take it again. Walter stepped beside Marcus. "The child you called bad for this mall is my granddaughter," he said, looking at Denise. Then he faced the employees and tenants. "The man you threatened is the only person here who followed our rules when following them cost him something." His voice softened, but the room remained still. "I believe him because the evidence does, not because he helped my family." Marcus lowered his eyes for a moment. The recognition carried weight, but it did not erase the question Noah had asked about their apartment or the fear Sophie had felt when adults spoke over her. Walter understood that. "Power did not reveal the truth today," he said. "A maintenance worker preserved it after management tried to rewrite it." For several seconds, no one applauded. The silence was not empty. It held every whisper about Marcus's boots, every polite dismissal of Sophie's permit, every moment when procedure had been used to make cruelty look reasonable. Then Walter turned to Marcus. "Tell me what Rivergate must do to make this right." Marcus looked at the restored permit, the black tape across Claire's sign, Sophie's wet donation notebook, and Noah's small hand still inside his own. "I don't want to check," he said. And as the entire atrium waited, the question was no longer what Rivergate could give Marcus, but what kind of man he would choose to be now that the people who had ignored him were finally listening. The atrium remained quiet after Marcus said he did not want to check. Denise had been escorted to the administrative corridor with board counsel, not through a jeering crowd but through the same process she had once used to silence others. Preston stood with his attorney near the dark Lux SIP counter, while the procurement officer collected the unsigned addendum, the marketing invoice, and the equipment declaration. Around them, shoppers slowly returned to their bags and strollers, speaking in low voices as if the marble floor had become a place where ordinary words should be handled carefully. Marcus looked at Walter across the repaired yellow sign. "I want Rivergate to say what happened clearly," he said. "Not that there was confusion, not that mistakes were made. Sophie had permission. Her stand was safe. She was removed because a paying tenant complained, and management changed the record afterward." Walter nodded once. "That will be stated publicly. And one manager should not be able to hide a community permit." Agreed. Frontline employees need a way to stop an order when a child or public safety is at risk without losing their jobs. Brent lowered his eyes. Marcus continued before anyone could mistake his request for revenge. "That protection should include him." Brent looked up. "Mr. Reed, I pulled the table." "You did. I scared her." Sophie stood beside Walter, both hands resting on the donation notebook. Marcus did not soften the truth for him. "You followed an order without checking whether it was right. Then you preserved the phone, kept the radio record, and told the truth when it could have cost you your badge." Brent's jaw tightened.
I'm sorry, Sophie.
She looked at Walter before answering, not because she needed permission to feel, but because she wanted the safety of a trusted adult nearby. "You should have read my permit," she said. "I should have. And you shouldn't pull tables when kids are standing there."
No.
"I shouldn't." Marcus turned to Walter. "A second chance isn't pretending he did nothing wrong. It's making sure he knows what to do next time." Walter asked board counsel to create a formal retraining and probation plan for Brent, including child safety procedure, evidence preservation, and the right to question unsafe verbal orders. Brent would keep his job only if he completed it and accepted supervision. The decision did not erase what he had done. It gave the truth somewhere useful to go. Before the atrium emptied, the community coordinator returned Sophie's permit in a clear protective sleeve. She placed it beside the yellow sign and read the correction into the public record. Sophie Bennett had been authorized from the beginning. Her stand had not caused the electrical failure. No safety violation had occurred. Sophie listened without smiling until the final sentence was finished. Then she pressed the sleeve flat with her palm, as though making certain the words could not be moved again. The investigation lasted 6 weeks. Denise was dismissed after the independent review confirmed record alteration, improper interference with community permits, and the delay of a documented electrical repair. Preston's promotional arrangement was cancelled, and Lux SIP's contract entered a new bidding process. The employees behind the counter kept their jobs under a temporary operator because Walter refused to punish workers who had never seen the emails or the unsigned agreement. Marcus received every hour of lost pay and a written correction in his employment file. The safety commendation mattered more to him than the envelope containing the back pay. It stated that he had protected 2 children, isolated an electrical hazard, and preserved evidence while under personal pressure. Months later, when Rivergate opened a competitive position for facilities safety supervisor, Marcus applied like everyone else. He sat through the interview, submitted his maintenance record, and answered questions about budgets, inspections, and staff training. Walter did not sit on the hiring panel. Marcus earned the position because his work history showed the same thing the atrium had shown. He did not become responsible when someone important started watching. He had been responsible all along. The larger change appeared near the fountain where Sophie's table had once stood. A permanent sign now read Rivergate Community Corner. Youth groups, libraries, shelters, and neighborhood organizations could reserve the space through a public calendar. Every application was reviewed by 2 separate departments, and every denial required a written reason and an appeal outside mall management. Claire Bennett's Community Access Clause was printed beneath the new policy, not as a sentimental decoration but as an active rule. Walter funded none of it through a private gift that could disappear with his mood. The board approved it, audited it, and placed it in Rivergate's operating charter. Sophie's lemonade stand became the first event under the new system. Her goal was reached through hundreds of small donations, with a transparent matching program from several tenants. The final total did not bear Walter's name. It bore the name of Maple Street Children's Library. On the morning the Claire Bennett Children's Corner opened, Marcus carried his red toolbox. Into the library, Noah walked beside him holding the repaired yellow sign, careful not to bend the black tape across the word library. The toolbox no longer looked to Noah like proof that his father belonged behind other people's walls. It held the screws that had steadied Sophie's table, the tape that had restored her mother's sign, and the ordinary tools Marcus had used to keep a small truth from being crushed under polished language. "I used to hate that shirt," Noah admitted while Marcus measured the wall. Marcus looked down at his clean navy uniform. "Why?" "Because people see it and think they can talk to you like you don't matter." Marcus marked the first screw hole with a pencil. "The shirt tells people what job I do. It doesn't get to tell them what kind of man I am." Noah handed him the level. Together they hung the sign above a low reading shelf. No one covered the tear. Sophie had insisted the black tape remain visible. Beside it, the library placed a copy of the original permit, Claire's Community Access Clause, and a small card that read, "Repaired by Marcus Reed before anyone knew who Sophie was." Walter stood near Claire's photograph, holding the same worn brass key he had placed on the table in the atrium. He had spent years believing money could protect Sophie from grief. It had only taught him how to arrange help without being present for it. "I should have known about the fundraiser," he told her. Sophie looked at the photograph of her mother. "I wanted to finish what she started, and I let you carry that alone." Walter did not ask to be forgiven. He asked whether he could come every Saturday to read with her. "Even when there aren't cameras?" Sophie asked. The question was gentle, but it carried the memory of adults who behaved differently when important people were watching. Walter nodded. "Especially then." She placed her hand inside his. Across the room, Brent arrived without his security jacket, carrying a box of donated books from the mall employees. He had completed the first part of his retraining and now asked children before moving their belongings, explained rules before enforcing them, and wrote down verbal orders that did not sound right. Sophie accepted the books. She did not hug him or tell him everything was forgotten. She simply said, "Put them by the blue shelf." It was enough for a beginning. When the first group of children entered, their sneakers whispered over the carpet. Walter sat in the middle of the reading circle with Sophie beside him. Noah leaned against Marcus's shoulder while Marcus closed his toolbox and slid it beneath the table. Sophie brought them 2 paper cups of lemonade, then carried a third to the framed photograph of Claire. Marcus set it on the shelf below her picture. No one spoke for a moment. It was not the frozen silence of the atrium, when evidence had left powerful people with nowhere to hide. It was a softer silence, filled with pages turning, a grandfather learning how to stay, and 2 boys watching a torn sign become something stronger than it had been before. Marcus sat on the floor among the children, his old wedding ring catching a stripe of afternoon light, while the black tape above him held firm across the yellow paper. Dignity had never needed to shout. It had only needed one man to keep his hands steady until kindness had time to become justice.